Hello and welcome. You're listening to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm Dave Schrader. That's Tim Dennis. A little bit later on, Theater of the Mind set up for you. I want to remind people, we're out on the Jericho cruise, having a great time. This Wednesday, we're going to be doing the UFO intention experiment. And as promised, I said we would mention, and we did yesterday on the show, the ways that you can be a part of that intention experiment. So make sure you check out yesterday's show to listen in and get some information on how you can be a part of helping us on October 30th. Also to remind you, we're trying to put together a Midnight in the Desert Paracon, miniature Paracon for fans to come on out and meet myself, Tim Weisberg, Tim Dennis, Shannon LeGros, producer Michelle, and CKNYE, Art Bell's final radio station, and just get a chance to be together, do some remote viewing exercises, talks on ghosts, cryptids, and more. And we'd love for you to be a part of it. All you have to do is email me, Dave at darknessradio.com, Dave at darknessradio.com, and I will put that email into a folder, and as soon as we release the information, we'll let you know about it first. So Dave at darknessradio.com, just say you want to be a part of the spring event, and we'll put your email in. All right, let's get started. Tim, joining us today, we have an interesting guest. He is a former Minneapolis police officer who is a listener of the show, friend of the show, and has finally decided to come out in the open regarding something that happened to him quite a while ago, and share regards to the paranormal and the like. And you know, I'm always fascinated when it's somebody, you know, one of the brothers in blue that have a story to share, because, you know, it is what it is. You take a little bit more, I don't know, umbrage in hearing these stories because of who they are, what they've been through, what they come through, and what they're willing to share. So joining us for today's program is Greg Clark. Greg, thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome, Dave.
I know this is tough for you to discuss, and I think you would mention it's going to be one of the first times you've really kind of put this out there. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you again. And I know it's been a rough couple of weeks with some deaths of brothers in blue as well. And you had made an interesting comment to me that, you know, that you think when it gets to this point, a lot of times it is the dark forces kind of at work and at play and messing with people like you in this field. Is that a safe, am I understanding what you'd mentioned properly? Is that a safe understanding?
More than that. I mean, I firmly and believe it from the bottom of my heart that there are forces of evil, and some of us are targeted by these forces. And sometimes these forces can drive people, they can drive people right to suicide. And unfortunately, we had to deal with that this last week with one of my brothers. It was a situation where he was under extreme pressure, and I understand it because it was the same kind of pressure I was under 10 years ago. And mine did not go the way that his did. However, I was injured in a fall and had a traumatic brain injury at that point, was not expected to survive. And when I say it was at a dark place, it was the lowest point I've ever been at in my life. I'd been injured in the line of duty. The department decided it was time to separate from me. I had just gone through a divorce. On my 46th birthday, I was notified that my divorce was final. It was a divorce that I did not want. And it affected me greatly. And as part of the divorce agreement, I got the house up in the Walker, Minnesota area, and it was just before deer hunting, and I had gotten up in the middle of the night and went to the bathroom, and as I was coming back, I tripped over one of my gear bags. I sometimes think I was pushed. The last thing I remember seeing was the back of a steel chair coming towards my head, and it looked like when I tried to reconstruct it months later, not only did I hit the steel chair, I probably hit the oak footboard on the way down.
All right. Wow, that's devastating. And again, you have all of this stuff kind of heaping up on you all at one time, and all of this kind of negativity in your life, which many of us face, similar situations with bad jobs, bad situations, and divorce. But then to end up having this accident, and how severe was it?
It was severe enough that when they finally found me, I'm guessing it was about 3 days later, somewhere around the 5th of November, the deputies that found me actually thought it was a homicide scene. And they had canceled the ambulance and then started the coroner. And I know the deputies that were there and the officer that came out from Walker. And the ironic part about that, the officer that came out from Walker, the Walker Police Department, was a former Minneapolis Police lieutenant that had retired and went back home up there and was working part-time. But in talking to these guys afterwards, they said, "Greg, you were dead. We've all seen dead people, and you were dead." And somewhere along the line, they said I took a deep gasp. And it was the first time that they'd heard or seen me breathe since they got there. And they immediately started the ambulance again. And they ended up taking me by ambulance to a hospital in Park Rapids, Minnesota, which is about 30 miles away. An interesting part to that is I had asked one of my children, my middle daughter, to give me her thoughts on that day and how she was notified and what she remembers. She ended up sending me an email that's a full 3 pages long. And there are excerpts from that I would like to interject when we have time and when it plays out.
Sure. Now can I ask something real quickly? So once you physically, the last thing you remember seeing is the back of that steel chair, then you're out, you're down and out for the count for up to 3 days. During that time, do you have any memory, a near-death experience? Did you see the light? Did you hear anything? Any kind of memory at all that, people would associate with this type of experience?
I had absolutely the most massive experience I think anybody could ever have and return to this life. I don't know when it happened, Dave. I don't know if it was in those first days, because when they gave me up for dead, my kids and my ex-wife were notified that they needed to get to the hospital to say their goodbyes because I am a donor, and they were ready to harvest my organs. My brain had moved all the way to the left side of my head. The right side was filled with fluid, and there was no brain activity.
Oh, my God.
So it continued. So my middle daughter is just frantic. She's calling. She called my eldest daughter, who was at college in Moorhead at the time. So that was only an hour away. Thank God her now husband was with her to, kind of help quell the mayhem. They got a hold of my ex-wife. They got a hold of my son, who was hunting with my former father-in-law up in northern Minnesota, and they all converged on the hospital at Park Rapids. So once again, they did another CAT scan, still nothing. And at one point, my middle daughter came into the room, and there's some differing thoughts on what she said to me, but one of them that was kind of current was that she went in and she had not gone to an organized church for several years. She was 16 years old and a very strong personality. And she came in and like many people do, she said, if you need to take somebody, please take me, because I can't live without my daddy. And there were some other words that I don't remember hearing them, but what they said happened was a tear came out of my right eye, which was the first sign that something may have been going on. Doctor came back in, says, no, it's just the reptilian portion of his brain shutting down. And they said in the middle of the night, I had a seizure. And in order for someone to have a seizure, there has to be some kind of brain activity. There was a nurse there that told my ex-wife, get him out of here. He needs to get to a hospital with the neurology department. He can't be brain dead without a seizure. So somewhere in all of this, I just remember waking up and climbing a hill, going to the light. And when I got to where the light was, I felt nothing but love and peace. And it was the most beautiful place I had ever seen or been or experienced in my life. And I believe I was talking to God. God said to me, my son, you are welcome to come in and stay, but your work on earth is not complete. The choice is yours to make. And I remember literally in my mind, now this communication was all nonverbal.
Okay, because now, are you seeing yourself as a corporeal being, like head, shoulders, knees, and toes where you're at, or are you just like you're looking out your eyes, like a movie?
Nope, I was a being.
You were a being,
me.
But you could hear. This was like this was like telepathic messages that you were getting.
Exactly.
Now, prior to this, did you have any belief or faith in an afterlife or a God? Did that ever register for you, or was it just something that was, okay, God, whatever, and it didn't play a big part in your life?
I've always been extremely spiritual, and I was a churchgoer since I was a kid, not religiously every Sunday. But any cop who's been through what we went through and says he's not a believer is a damn liar. I think that we all, knowing what lies in front of us, or the potential of what lies in front of us, we all are believers. Having dealt with death as much as we did, either violent or nonviolent, you have to believe. I don't believe that there's anybody out there, any one of us, cops, firemen, EMS, that's not a believer. And when I got the information that I could stay, and I wanted to stay, but my work on earth was not done. And I thought to myself, crap, I never disobeyed an order. I never shirked a duty. I have to go back. It was essentially the highest call to duty that I've ever faced in my life. I remember.
Real quickly, I was just going to say, so you have this understanding that as much as you want to stay, you need to go back and do something, that you still have a task at hand. Is there any clear representation to what that task is? Does God give you, go back and spread my word, go back and save a life, go back and do Beyond the Darkness radio? I mean, what was the purpose for coming back? Did they give you a specific task or set of tasks?
Dave, the interesting part of that is I'm still wondering what it is. I don't know. Perhaps it's to spread his word. I always thought that I'd come back and push some kid out of the way of a speeding bus or something and save the kid, probably get killed myself, and then I'd get to go to heaven and stay. Well, that hasn't happened. Maybe it's just helping people along the way. Spreading his word is, I don't know. I don't know why. But I do know that I had to fight my way back.
The concept that you're grappling with here, this idea that there's something more, does that fulfill you? I mean, you were in a dark place before this accident. You were, as you said, the lowest point in your life. Does this gift, this second chance, does it fulfill you to know that you have a destiny to go back and that you have more to do here? Did that help you get through the darkness?
I believe it does, and it did now. I can give you a little bit of a fast forward here because I was in a coma for 10 days, and as my daughter wrote in her letter to me yesterday, they would do CAT scans on me 3 times a day, checking for brain activity, and they didn't find any. And on the 10th day, my ex-wife was still with me. I woke up.
And during that time, did you have any memory or see what was going on in the room around you while you were out? Or were you always in this other realm, this other place?
The answer to that kind of goes back to the story, the rest of the story, as the late, great Paul Harvey would say. When I knew I was tasked with coming back, I had to cross a river in heaven. Now, what river is it? Was it the River Jordan? Was it the River of Life? I don't think it was Styx, and I don't think it was Hades. But as I crossed that river, I came out on the other side, and I felt that I was wearing the armor of God. And waiting for me, that I should mention that there was a sword in my left hand. Why do I remember that? Because I'm left-handed. There was a sword in my left hand, and there were 6 demons waiting for me on the other side. The battle was on, and I honestly believe it was a battle for my soul, because for whatever reason, and I don't know the reason, I do believe, even to this day, Satan wants my soul. And I am constantly vigilant about watching for pitfalls that could befall me. I am vigilant in making sure that I'm a humble man, where a lot of times I think I maybe was arrogant before this. I try not to let that come back through. But as I came out of that river and those 6 demons were waiting for me, the battle was on. And as I worked my way through slaying these demons, I got through the 6th one, and I remember falling to my knees, and I said, God, I have nothing else to give. I'm done in. And the next thing I remembered after that conflict, was waking up, and I must have been fighting at some point because I was in restraints in the hospital room. And my ex-wife was standing over me, and she said, "You're okay. You had an accident." And at that point, I'm thinking, God, I hope I didn't kill anybody. Immediately I think I was in a traffic accident, and I remember then going back out. And sometime after that, I came to in the hospital room. I was no longer restrained. I still had the breathing tube in, and that was not fun, but I was breathing on my own. I remember trying to get up and out of the bed because once you've been in bed for that long and you haven't moved muscles, it's extremely hard to suddenly stand up. And I did, and I think I made one step and realized I had a catheter in. And,
ouch. Okay. Yeah, that's a shock to the system too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I had about 15 different lines running in me at that point because I'm sure, they were trying to rehydrate me and everything else. But I grabbed the tree that was holding all of the IV bags and everything else, and I grabbed the urine bag, and I started as best I could towards the door. And I was met by a doctor. And I must have looked like Augie Doggy, pointing at the tube in my mouth like the old cartoon character where he wanted a biscuit. And going, And he said, "You want that tube out?" And I shook my head, yes. He said, "Take a big, deep breath." I did, and he yanked the tube out. And I knew I was alive at that point because it hurt like hell. He asked me if I was Greg Clark, and I nodded my head yes. And he looked at me and he said, "I'm the doctor that did your brain surgery. And, sir, you are my Lazarus." He says, "If every neurosurgeon gets one in his career that was as bad as you," I later found out I had a 1% chance of survival when I went into surgery, but sometimes 1% is good enough. And he said, "You are my Lazarus, man." And I thought, well, I think I better go sit down on the bed again and just relax, because I had virtually no strength left. So I was assisted back to the bed, and I convalesced for a few days. I couldn't talk for a couple more days, but when I woke up, my mother was sitting there, and when I could speak again, the first thing that I told her was that I died and crossed over. And I tried to tell the story, but my voice didn't hold out very long. So that's kind of the nutshell version of it.
Now, when you tell her something this impactful, is she thinking this is just a result of the brain injury? Did she believe your claims? What was that like?
Later on, she told me that I was very, very adamant that I had crossed over and I died and was given the opportunity to come back. And it was the good news that I was spreading immediately when I was able to speak again. Because when you have a breathing tube in for that many days, your vocal cords are not ready to be used. And
when you saw those, you said there were 6 demons waiting for you as you crossed that river?
Yes, sir.
Did they speak to you? Was it more telepathic messages? Was it not spoken or telepathic. It was just the malevolence and hatred coming from them that you could sense?
I could feel the seething rage that was coming from them. And interestingly enough, years later, I was watching Ghost Adventures when they were at the Old Ram Inn in England. And one of the figurines that I saw on there was what the demons looked like. And literally, Dave, my blood ran cold. I mean, I started to get, literally, I was getting just angry, very angry, because I saw one again. And it's undescribable. I don't know where that figurine came from, but it literally was identical to what I saw and what I fought and what I defeated.
All right. Well, discuss with me, if you would, what these beings look like. I mean, how is it the quintessential demonic look you think of, everybody thinks of when that happens, or did each one have a defining look to them? What can you tell us about that?
They weren't cookie cutters. It's hard to describe them as a quintessential demon that we would think of from Dante's Inferno, for instance. That was not what it looked like. It almost they looked almost more like very large Yodas, if you will. They looked more like that, and they were armed also with swords and the old-time maces, the spikes on the ball type thing, and I know I had a shield as well when the fight was going on. Another interesting point to this, I had told this story to some selected groups before, and I walked in one night. They used to bring me back when a bunch of students came through, and the moderator of this group looked at me and said, "I saw a movie about your experience." And I looked at him and I said, "Jim, that's not funny." He said, "No, I saw a movie that had the same experience as you, but there were only 4 demons." And I just kind of let it go at that. And I said, later on, I caught him during a break, and I said, "Jim, what the heck are you talking about?" And he said, "I saw a movie called Pilgrim's Progress. And the pilgrim in that movie, and I know it's a book as well, there was a point where he had to face 4 demons, and they were named. I don't recall the names that they had at that point, but so I had to see the movie. So I ordered it off of Amazon, and I'll be damned, there was a point in there where that pilgrim had to fight 4 demons. And that was another one that it was a wow moment. It was a wake-up kind of a moment. So I have to think that I'm not the first to have this experience.
Yeah, and to have had to fight your way back and get through that's kind of more of a unique angle I've never really heard before. I want to talk more about this journey and about the paranormal, how it's made itself known to you before, during, and after. We do need to take a break, but before we do, let's take a visit back to the Darchives in this edition of Theater of the Mind. After a life of parochial schooling, I had a falling out with religion, church, and my faith. It no longer suited me, and I found it silly, and nothing more than old superstitions cobbled together as a money-making scheme for churches. I never considered myself a bad person, certainly no worse than anyone else I knew, Like many, I was often selfish and not nearly as neighborly or caring as I could be. I had moved into my neighborhood when I was 27 and never once had a word with any of my neighbors besides a simple nod of the head in passing. Then, everything I knew changed on a summer day, a few months after I turned 45. I was out mowing my lawn when I felt my stomach start to sour, a strange sensation in my chest, and I immediately regretted that gas station burritos I had scarfed down for lunch. The heat was getting to me, and I cut off the lawnmower to take a sip of water. Then it hit me like a thunderous punch from Mike Tyson, square in the chest. My mouth dropped open into a silent scream, and my vision began to flicker. I could hear the sounds of the neighborhood, kids playing, dogs barking, people mowing their own lawns. Then it was silent. All I could hear was the offbeat rhythm of my own heartbeat, pulsing in my ears. Throbbing, throbbing, throbbing. Then the lights went out, and I collapsed. I remember feeling like I was laying on my parents' waterbed when I was a child. Then slowly, lights started to flicker once more, and I could hear voices. Oh, he's here. Finally, he's here. Then I could see bright light, and set against it was the stark silhouettes of people. Voices sounded familiar but distant, calling my name. I began to feel lighter, floating, and my vision slowly began to return to me. And I could see a mass of people smiling, waving. Some appeared to be crying. And when I realized that, I began to feel a sense of dread and fear come over me. Their smiling faces gave way to somber looks. I felt like I was in a large freight elevator looking out at the crowd, and then the bottom dropped out. And I heard what I thought was my mother sobbing as I fell. Through the darkness, terror growing inside me. I was so confused, so scared. I fell for what felt like 10 minutes. Just imagine, the scariest drop from the roller coaster you've ever been on, only it kept going and going and going. Then my body stopped with a jerking motion. I had the sensation of chains wrapped around my wrists and ankles, suspending me above something. I could feel heat, but not like any heat I had ever felt before. I felt it coming at me like waves of heat you see coming off the road ahead on a hot day. The chains, heavy and dense, jangled loudly whenever I tried to move. The blackness around me seemed alive, moving like something from a horror movie. I could hear slithering, but could see nothing. The chains biting into my hands and ankles with every move. Then, the cacophony of screams below me erupted. Slow at first, then it seemed to be coming at me from every angle. Men, women, children, and something animal and very angry. This wailing filled my head and I begged for it to stop. I hung there for days and days. The screams would ebb and then return with a vengeance. My head pounded, every muscle in my naked body screaming out for relief. The darkness all around gave me the most horrific sense of isolation. Even surrounded by voices and screams, I felt so alone, so cold inside while sweating and burning on the outside. Then, the slithering sounds began again, and I could sense something striking at me, like long claws. They would often miss, and I could feel the rush of air from unseen claws, then spasms of pain as they would find their target. Then joyous, dark laughter would bellow from below me. I was going insane. I would cry out but make no sound. I struggled against the chains that would not give. This went on without mercy for weeks. My mind was dissolving into madness. I had a life review, if you can call it that. As I lay there, suspended and aching, I kept trying to rationalize what was happening to me, but the more I did, the more fruitless it seemed. Was this hell? Was I dead? Was this really hell? An actual hell? I tried to remember any stupid prayer from childhood but couldn't. Instead, I would just remember every hateful thing, every nasty word I spoke, and every person I ever lashed out at. I would feel their sadness, all of it, from all of them, all at once. It was devastating. Then I felt the blows to my chest, and what I could only describe as lightning strikes appearing before my eyes. With every brilliant stroke of light, I could see the faces that surrounded me, locked in horror, mouths agape, screaming, eyes gone or dark and sinister, staring at me with such hate and contempt. The wailing of the voices was everywhere again. Flash, flash, flash. The lights would streak around the room, lighting up more horrors with every flash, flash, flash. I felt the claws swiping at me, the growls from below sounding more angered than ever before. I would feel my flesh tear and my mind screamed in agony as the lights would flash, and the pounding from inside my chest grew more intense. I hung my head and stopped resisting the bonds of the chains, and in my head I cried out, "I'm sorry, so sorry. Please, God, let this end." Then there was silence. There was nothing. Then, as fast as I had fallen, I began to feel myself flying at an inconceivable speed upwards. The cries below began, but sounded hollow and millions of miles away. I realized the chains were gone from my ankles and wrists, and the lightning started again, but I couldn't see anything, just sharp white light that hurt my eyes, and the electric crackle sound it left ringing in my ears. Then there was a face before me, the last flash of white light, and I could see someone or something standing before me. That's when I heard a gentle voice say,
"It's not too late."
And all went black. I could feel my body. I could hear background noises filtering in. I could hear voices calling my name, begging me to come back. Then I heard the words, "Clear!" And my body jumped as something hit my chest and filled me with electricity. My eyes sprang open and the pain came crashing through. I was laying in my yard surrounded by neighbors and police and EMTs feverishly working on me. I looked up and I saw the face of the portly little EMT working so hard to bring me back. He leaned down and said, "I thought I lost you. Glad you didn't give up. You were gone for about 3 to 5 minutes there before we started working on you." What? 3 to 5 minutes? How was that possible? I languished for what I knew was weeks on end, being tormented, screamed at, and torn to pieces slowly. Eternity means something more to me now, I'll tell you that. I lived the pain of everyone I ever hurt. It felt like forever. Now, sometimes at night when I lay there unable to sleep, I can hear the screams of torment. I can feel the claws trying to grab me, but I always come back to the soft voice that said,
"It's not too late."
God, I hope not.
Beyond the darkness.
We're back. This is the best in paranormal talk radio. I'm Dave Schrader. That's Tim Dennis. Our guest today, Greg Clark, as we talk about his very personal event. I mean, from near death to a heavenly experience, battling demons and back. When you're having this war, this physical war, is it what is it like to have actually engaged in battle with the demonic forces? Did you could you feel things? Could you smell things? Could you hear things? What were the senses like?
The senses are completely heightened. I could literally smell and see their blood. And the blood was not red. It was dark. And it stunk. And they weren't very good fighters, let me put it that way. But I mentioned earlier that I believed that I was swathed, if you will, in the armor of God, as it's written in the Bible. And the sword that I had, it fell true each time that I would slay a demon. And these demons they didn't want to play fair. I'll tell you that. It was not one at a time. They came at me, and I fought for all I was worth. And the odds kept getting better and better. 6-on-1, and 5-on-1, 4-on-1. And then I think that they realized that they were all pretty much beat because I held the power that day. I had the high ground, if you will. And I fought with all I had. I fought with my very being. I fought with and for my soul. I was not going to let the Prince of Darkness's army take me. and they didn't.
All right, you're tasked with this deal of battling the demons to make your way back. Obviously, there's a reason you're supposed to be here, Greg. I mean, they wouldn't have fought you so tooth and nail to keep you from returning. Or do you think, just on the outside thought, do you think that they were put there on purpose, that let's say God put them there to make you fight for your life, to fight, to give you that mental strength in order to come back from where you were?
That very well could be.
Now, you said that there were six demons for you.
Correct.
And, I don't know what was going on in your life at that time, but could these demons represent, relationship issues, drinking or drugs or anger issues or whatever things that you were going on in life? Could that be part of what you were battling to defeat so that when you came back, you were a more grounded person?
Absolutely, because I had battled alcohol for many years, and alcohol was a major player in my divorce. It was my ex-wife will tell you it was the reason for the divorce, and that very well could be in her mind if that's what she felt she had to do, and that's why. And I, to this day, we're not best friends, but we're civil to each other. I ran into her about a month and a half ago, and in the oddest place, she was walking out of my chiropractor's office because she'd gone in there to get a massage. And it was like, whoa, what's this? And so we still keep contact with each other. We have three children in common. I mean,
right. So that'll always be a tie to it. But now you have that. Kind of re-examining it then, do you think that what you were doing, those demons that you battled, were just versions of you?
Could be.
Maybe why they were just subtly weaker than you and you were more powerful because you were one. They were, splintered. They were weaker in their smaller forms. I'm not trying to get all psychoanalytical. Yeah, good use of the English language, Tim. I'm not trying to get all psychoanalytical, but I just wonder if that's kind of the concept, because you came back a changed man, right?
I came back changed, but I was not. I still, when I got done with that, I still would use alcohol as a coping mechanism. Mm-hmm. I'm much better today, and maybe that was part of my journey. Maybe that's something I had to go through to get back here and to be a good man. I don't know. I don't know what those. Right. I don't know what those demons were sent for yet. I don't know why I was given the opportunity. I think you do. I think you had to fight through the demons in order to get the strength to get back to life. I think that's a lot of what you're dealing with. So that you're looking for some grandmaster plan once you made it back. I don't know that there necessarily is one. I think the grandmaster plan may have been you defeating those demons. And yes, some of them may still have a little foothold on you, but you've got a much better power over them at this point. I wonder if that might be more of the concept of what you've dealt with. I've heard many of the people that have crossed over and come back have dealt with surreal issues, things that they, put a face to, are recognizable to them, but, that's something that they have to deal with. And that very well just could be your ability. Now, here you are sharing your story 10 years later, and you are opening up about it. So that, that's part of this as well. There are many people out there that are touched by your story and will feel a connection or a simpatico to you because they've been there. They've had these experiences themselves and may have thought themselves crazy, but now here you are sharing that same story. So you just never know how it can impact people. But the tough part is then, Greg, you come back from that place of comfort, that place of joy and love. You were given free will to make that choice. You can stay or you can go, but I think you should go. You've still got things to do. Yes.
Are there regrets that you didn't stay? Do you ever find yourself grappling with that? And I know some people that have come back have faced a lot of depression over that because they want to be back there. They want to reconnect with that feeling of overall love.
You know, Dave, there's good days and there are bad days, and there are days when I've said to myself, why didn't I just stay? And then you wake up the next day, the sun is shining. You know, I still have issues in my life. You know, everybody's got money issues. There's always something that comes up. You know, it's if I would have won the lottery last night and won the $1.6 billion, I would still have done this interview with you today, because I think...
And we would have charged you $250,000 to do it, just so you know that going in.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? I probably would have given you that much in a tip as well as the fee, because...
Dare to dream. Dare to dream.
You know, one ticket in South Carolina hopefully they didn't have a heart attack when they read the numbers, you know. But anyway, none of us are ever completely happy in this life. There are always challenges. And I face those challenges every day, just like you do, just like Tim does. I've had health issues, and believe it or not, once you have one traumatic brain injury that was as severe as mine, anytime you whack your head, whether it be on a file cabinet, a car door, whatever, you are susceptible to having more head injuries, I found out. And I have now had a total of 4 traumatic brain injuries.
Oh, my gosh.
The only one, you know, this is the part that I still don't understand, because when I had number 2, I went to sit down in a chair and I felt like I was pushed. The chair rolled over and it pinned me under the chair, and the chair was up against my desk and I could not lift the damn thing off of me. And thank God I had my cell phone with me when it happened. I had to call a buddy of mine to come over because I was all alone up north in the same place where the first one happened again. Which makes me wonder.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
No, go on.
Which makes me wonder, is there still a force that's after me? So in that one, when my buddy comes over, gets me out, he showed me a picture of it about 3 weeks ago and said, "Hey, remember this?" And I looked at my face, and it was bad. He called an ambulance. The ambulance takes me to a hospital in Brainerd. I won't go back to the one in Park Rapids, but they take me to Brainerd. Brainerd does a CAT scan on me and says, "You're bleeding in your brain. Get ready." So the next thing I know, I'm up on the chopper pad, and they're hauling me by chopper, by an air ambulance, from Brainerd to St. Cloud. And I get to St. Cloud, and they said, "Well, it's not so bad. It looks like the bleeding has stopped. We're just going to let your body absorb the fluid, so we don't need to do surgery, yada, yada, yada." So the next time it happened, I was at my then girlfriend, now fiance's house, where we lived. And this house, Dave, when I walked in, the first thing I said is, "Beautiful woodwork. This is all old school handcrafted. What year was the house built?" She said, 1910. I said, "How long has it been haunted?" Because I could feel it.
Okay. That answers my next question. I was going to say, have you been opened to this now?
Oh, God, yes. And I know this is another interesting part. I know now that some of the cold spots that I felt when I was working in different places were extremely, extremely haunted places. I talked to a producer last week about this. They're making a TV show about 911 calls that turn into something paranormal. And I gave them 3 instances that I could think of right off the top of my head. And, we'll see where it goes. But anyway, hindsight is 20/20, and I have a much broader hindsight now.
Right. So at the time, you don't think that they were necessarily paranormal, or did you even back then?
I think in the back of my mind, I said, there's something really bad going on here, or there's some kind of other force here. I was not as tuned into it as I am now. A buddy of mine that's a real estate agent had me walk through his office about 1.5 years ago, and he'd had other people in there, and they told him there's a spot in the house where somebody died and that person has not crossed over. And when I went into his office, I found the exact same thing in the exact same spot. Does that make me the only thing it makes me is more aware, and I'm a believer that some souls get hung up in the journey. It's almost like the Sixth Sense, where I see dead people but they don't know they're dead. I don't necessarily see them, but I get a feeling.
Right. You can sense that they're there and near you. Can we reel back to your previous life before the head injuries then, and these cases that you talked about with the producer? You could think off the top of your head 3 times that 911 calls turned out to be something more paranormal in nature. Can you give us some insights on those stories? I know our listeners would love to hear them. And we promise not to tell any other TV show.
Actually, I was when I was at the Minneapolis Police Department, I wore a lot of different hats, meaning that in a 1,000-man department, 1,000-person department, there's a lot of different lateral movement that you can make. One of my jobs was I was one of the 4 assistant range masters working full-time in a training unit on the gun range. And part of that training we did was trying to make it as realistic as possible. So we were able to get into some of the old barracks out at Fort Snelling. When I walked into those places, there was no electricity. It was, I'm thinking the first time I was there was probably like in March. So it was naturally cold inside. The buildings hadn't been occupied since the Vietnam era. But you just got that feeling where the hair was standing up on the back of your neck. And there was another force that was there. And we were doing training for active shooter scenarios there. And I think that we disturbed whatever that force was, because there would be times, especially after the sun went down, when you could walk through what were officers' quarters at the time, back in the day, and you would feel those cold spots. And I've talked to it with other instructors. We had our part-time staff out there with us. So, you can imagine what it takes to train basically 1,000 cops. It would take us, working 4 days a week. We would have to, we'd be out there for a month at a time. And here's the kicker. I'm on the way there the morning of September 11th, 2001. And I'm listening to one of the morning shows, and they said, wow, we're just getting information that a plane has hit one of the World Trade Centers. And about 8-10 minutes later, the report of the second plane hitting the towers comes in. And that particular radio show host said, ladies and gentlemen, we are under attack. So keep in mind where Fort Snelling is. For those that don't know where Fort Snelling in Minnesota is, it is directly on the border of one of the runways for Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. So we're getting reports, coming through of what's going on. And I happen to have a camper on my truck at that time. I had a TV in there, and we were able to fire up the TV and watch some of it. The rest of it is coming in off of the radio. So we don't know what the heck's going on. So we hear that they ground the planes. And we're looking out over the runway, and as far as you can see, looking to the east, there's nothing but planes coming. So everybody was making those landings that were ordered down by the feds. When that airport went silent, something in those buildings changed. I've got the hair standing up on the back of my neck and my arms right now. I got the chills.
Yeah, holy cow.
Remembering this, there was a seething rage on that ground that I now refer to as hallowed and sacred, because it appeared to me those cold spots that I'd felt before was still energy, more than likely from soldiers that had fought anywhere from World War I on through World War II, through Korea, through Vietnam, that were still attached to those barracks. Those soldiers were pissed. And it was this energy that you could literally feel the building it had changed. And everything about it had changed. And suddenly our training kind of changed that day too, because, anybody that was on a SWAT team, I said, look, you guys are going through, I don't know if they're going to call you up. I don't know what's going to go on. They did eventually later that afternoon, and they kept everybody, pretty much going on 2 shifts throughout the city. Everybody was on 12-hour days, at least for the first week after 9/11. Or I'm sorry, after 9/11. 9/11, yeah. But that was one of the ones that I relayed to the producers. Another one, and I talked to 2 of the guys that were on the call before I talked to the producer on this. We get a Bergen progress call.
Wow. Powerful stories, Greg. And to be able to look at some of these older stories back and realize now, with the knowledge that you have, that there was a paranormal element at play, it seems maybe the paranormal has been around you more in your life than you even ever gave it credit for.
I believe that, and I believe it came to me probably in about 1969. I was born in 62, and my folks bought a house that was to be renovated, and it was an old 3-story house, and I never felt right living there. Too much weird stuff would happen. My sister was a little girl at the time. She was born in 66, so she would have been 3 years old going on 4 when we lived there. And there was an old sewing room upstairs. I was afraid to go in it, but it shadows what you see on some of the paranormal shows about kids going in and then picking up on a conversation or singing a song where they left when they walked out of the room. It was freaky. And this house that was very old, I remember it had the old style window weights in it, and one of those came down, slammed on my hand, broke one of my fingers. There's no reason that window should have fallen. Ever since that time, I believe that I picked up on some of this paranormal stuff. And in doing research on it, Dave, you know as well as I do, these spirits, beings, entities, whatever, they have a way of attaching themselves to humans. And if you don't know how to get rid of it, you're not gonna. And unfortunately, I didn't learn about it till later in life. But I do believe that there's been certain things in my life that went on, and they were unexplainable. But to get back to some of the 911 calls that we had, one was a burglary in progress. They're both going to be burglary in progress calls. The next two I'm going to just quickly relate to you, where this is back in about 1992, maybe 91. A neighbor is watching an individual on the lower north side climb up the back stairs of an up-down duplex, and the individual suspect cuts the screen and goes in. My partner and I get there. We're less than a minute away. So we call for a canine. Canine gets in front. Now enough time has elapsed. It's probably been 4 or 5 minutes. And the suspect runs out the front entry to the upper level and immediately surrenders to the canine handler. No dog was ever unleashed, anything like that. So we get another car down there, take the guy into custody. He's sitting in the back seat. He's jabbering about, they got some really, really weird stuff up there, and there's an altar up there, and there's dead animals, and he was right. The canine went in, searched. There was nobody else up there, but we found a ritual altar. We found dead animals up there. There was blood up there. We went through some of the information trying to find who lived there, and there were journals that people kept, and they were talking about a human sacrifice, and when the baby is born, it will be sacrificed, and it went on and on and on. And finally, the actual owner of the house got there, and we were kind of pumped up about it. My partner looks at him and goes, you got a bunch of satanic people living upstairs? And he looked at my partner and he said, with just the straightest face in the world, there is a huge difference between Satanism and paganism. We looked at each other and I went, okay. So we said, we should probably search your house to make sure there's nobody else here, your lower level. And he was vehement about we not do it. We finally talked him into it.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found was the house was immaculate, like nobody lived there. But when we got to the basement, we saw this weird, shadowy kind of a painting on the wall. And when we stood close to it, you could not make out what it was. So we backed up across the basement. There were no lights in the basement. This house was probably 100 years old at that time, too. And what you saw when we lit it up with our lights, with our flashlights, it was a very blurry mural on the wall of a woman on an altar and hooded beings around her that were going to what appeared to be sacrifice her. And the owner of the house didn't want to talk about it when we asked him what was with the what was with the mural on the wall downstairs. So he didn't want to talk about it and asked us politely to leave. So in essence, we had one in custody for the burglary and no further information. So,
holy cow.
Yeah, it was a spooky one.
Yeah, it sounds like it. The paranormal, it's around. You still can access it. You can still feel it.
Absolutely.
Are you?
And
are you afraid of death now?
Not at all. Not at all. No, not at all. Do I want to go through pain before I go through death? I don't think anybody wants to go through pain. But I have no fear of death. There's an old Roger Whittaker song that has a line in it that says, "I have no fear of death, it brings no sorrow." And I think of that, when it's you that's doing the crossing over, there is no sorrow, because I believe eventually we're all going to end up in heaven. Some souls just get hung up in between, unless, you're somebody like Hitler or, any of the other dictators that have murdered and slaughtered their own people. I believe that has a very, very satanic element to it.
What do you, with what you deal with now, and you see your fellow police officers going through because of their positions in life, do you think that they're marked because they're trying to do good, they're trying to help? Do you think that makes them an automatic enemy of the demonic realm?
Absolutely. And if you look at how our culture has changed in the last 5 years even, with just the climate of the hatred of police, it has done some things that now make recruiting new officers almost impossible. Who in their right mind would want to go into that job with everybody against you? They have to stand together. We have to stand together. I support the police in every instance that I can. And I believe that we are the ones who stand in the gap. And the best way to describe it is 80% of the population would be considered sheep. 10% would be considered wolves. 10% are sheepdogs that protect the sheep from the wolves. And I believe that job is actually a calling. It's not an easy job to do. It's a job that can ruin you, that can tear you apart from your family. It promotes alcohol as a coping mechanism, because we're supposed to be that 10% that stands in the middle, that stands in the gap. But we're human, and it takes its toll.
It does.
Seeing the destruction.
Yeah, I was going to say, you see the inhumanity of that, and that's got to be just chewing the soul apart as well.
Absolutely. And I had a partner, one of my best friends ever on this earth, and he drank himself to death. And I pray that these things don't happen, but you're supposed to be tough. You're not supposed to admit that you're having issues. And I know PTSD is a huge, huge deal among police, fire, EMS, because we don't talk about it. We don't have the outlet to talk about it. And every department is going to say, well, we've got a support service in place for everybody. No, they don't. I mean, that's what do they expect you to do? Go talk to a psychiatrist that doesn't know you, that doesn't know what you've been through, and then they're going to make a determination on you. It's, quite frankly, most of the time, it's a thankless job, which is why it's huge when somebody, even today, comes up and says, thank you for your service. And I will literally get tears in my eyes going, wow, people really do still care.
I know they do. I think it's just that there's such a there's just so much negative in the world that's being focused on now. There's just so much, and it's so much easier to run with the bad stories, that I think that is what is unfortunately taking place and precedent over all the good. But just understand this, Greg, personally, I know I'm speaking for Tim and I on the show, that we respect the job that you and your brothers and sisters in blue do and have done, and the times that they put their lives on the line for us to be the one to take that bullet or to make that stand to protect our families and our loved ones. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts for doing what you've done. And I hope that in your life you find peace and the happiness that you seek, and that your next journey to the other side is a good one, and that you get your peace there as well.
And I will make a statement for all of us in our profession, which I'm just going to refer to as first responders, that means a tremendous amount to us. Just you thanking us for what we do, doing what we do.
Well, be safe. We'll say a prayer for you and your brothers and sisters, as I've done, in our private messages. I just encourage our listeners across the world, whether you support the police or not, that's why you should pray for them, because you should pray for good decisions, wise choices, clarity of mind and conscience, and pray that good things happen and that peace can be made and that law will be followed. And that's all we can do. I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us, sharing this very personal story and your journey to death, back, and battles with all types of demons. It's been an enlightening episode, and we appreciate you doing this.
Thank you very much, Dave, for the opportunity.
My pleasure. All right. We will be back, folks, next weekend. Brand new episodes. We're going to be recording those while we're aboard the Jericho cruise. So you'll have 2 brand new episodes next weekend. And remember to check out Monday through Friday this week on Midnight in the Desert. Tim Weisberg will be your host Monday and Tuesday. Shannon LeGros on Wednesday. I'll be joining her in the last 2 hours on Halloween to do some live ghost stories. We'll take your phone calls, and you could be a part of the show. And then Shannon will fill up the rest of the week on Midnight in the Desert. But I'll be out at the Paracon in the North Woods out in Bowler, Wisconsin, and there are still some tickets available. You can get them by visiting darknessevents.com. Click on the banner for the Paracon in the North Woods and join us out there. It's going to be a great time. You'll get to meet me, Grant Wilson, Jeff Belanger, a lot of great speakers. Linda Godfrey will be out there, and so many others. So make sure you check that out and join me out at the Paracon in the North Woods. I'd love the chance to meet and greet and say hi to everybody I possibly can. That's it for this week's show. Be kind, love one another. Say a prayer. Say a prayer for all of those affected by law enforcement on both sides, that better and cooler heads prevail in the future. And have a great weekend.